The woman who shattered my relationship wasn't an ex. She wasn't some seductive stranger. She didn't even come from outside my circle. She came from within it. The first time she smiled at me, I thought I was lucky to have someone like her in my corner, but behind that smile was something darker, something calculated. For years, I believed we were close. I told her everything, my fears, my goals, even the tiny doubts I had about the man I was about to marry. I thought I was venting. She thought I was handing her a blueprint. She didn't tear my relationship apart in one dramatic blow. No, that would have been too obvious, too easy to escape. She dismantled it piece by piece. Slowly, methodically. A compliment here, a private moment there, a whispered warning wrapped in fake concern. It took me a long time to realize what was happening. By the time I saw it clearly, the damage was already done. But here's the thing, when someone serves you poison, they always assume you'll swallow it quietly. They never expect you to pour a glass and offer it back. So I did. And when I did, I made sure she tasted every last drop. When Daniel and I first moved into our apartment, everything felt like it had finally clicked. We had been together for 7 years, through job changes, health scares, family drama, and more than a few rough patches. But after he proposed on a quiet Sunday morning over coffee, I truly believed we had crossed the finish line. Engaged, we were planning a future. And most importantly, we were happy. Or so I thought. I wasn't prepared for Mia. Mia was my younger sister by 5 years. And while we had our differences, I always considered her family in the truest sense. She had a free spirit, a certain effortless charm that made people fall in love with her after a single conversation. She was never the one to stay in one place for too long. Jobs, relationships, even cities, everything in her life came and went, like seasons. So when she called me in tears one night, saying her latest relationship had ended badly and she needed a place to stay for a few weeks, I didn't hesitate. Of course I told her, "You can stay with us as long as you need." She showed up the next morning with 3 suitcases and a smile that barely reached her eyes. At first she was quiet, reserved and sweet. She offered to cook, did the dishes, and thanked me a dozen times for letting her crash. As I knew he would be, he joked with her at dinner, helped her carry her stuff up the stairs, and even downloaded her favorite streaming shows so she'd feel more at home. That was just who he was, thoughtful, generous, a little too accommodating sometimes. One of the reasons I fell in love with him, the first few days went by smoothly. She mostly stayed in her room, occasionally joining us for movies or dinner. But then, little by little, she started to insert herself into our daily routines. It began with small things. I'd wake up early for work and find her already in the kitchen, making Daniel's favorite breakfast, something even I rarely had time to do on weekdays. She'd say, "I figured he deserved something homemade. You're always so busy." I laughed it off, grateful even, thinking she was just trying to contribute. Then she started joining us on date nights. Not always, but often enough that it started to feel less like an occasional thing and more like an expectation. I'd suggest going out. And before Daniel could respond, Mia would say, "Ew, that place sounds amazing. Can I tag along?" And Daniel, trying to be polite, would always say yes. I didn't want to make it awkward. I told myself it was temporary. She was hurting after all. She just needed support, time, and love. But something about her presence started to gnaw at me one night. I came home from work later than usual. The apartment smelled like roasted garlic and basil, my favorite. I walked in to find Mia and Daniel in the kitchen, laughing. Both in aprons, music playing, wine glasses on the counter, dinner that wasn't meant for me. They both turned and smiled when they saw me. And Mia said, "Surprise. We thought we'd cook for you," Daniel added. "She taught me how to make your favorite pasta." I smiled and thanked them, but deep down, something twisted inside me. When did my fiancé start sharing intimate cooking lessons with my sister? And why did it look like they were having more fun than we'd had in weeks? From then on, the subtle shifts became impossible to ignore. When we talked about wedding plans, Mia always had something to say. If I suggested a venue, she'd wrinkle her nose and say it was a bit tacky. If I showed her a dress I liked, she'd say it didn't flatter my shape. At first, it felt like honest, sisterly advice. But then she started making comments that didn't sit right. You know, some men just go along with weddings because they feel trapped. She once said, sipping coffee as she scrolled through her phone, "They don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I think it's sad." I laughed nervously, brushing it off. But when I looked over at Daniel, I saw something in his eyes. Hesitation, discomfort, maybe even guilt. I started to question myself. Was I imagining this? Was I reading too much into things? Was I jealous? The thought disgusted me. Jealous of my own sister? Never. But the feeling didn't go away. Every time she laughed a little too loudly at one of Daniel's jokes or placed her hand casually on his arm while passing by, I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem insecure or controlling. I was better than that. Stronger. But then came the day I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. She didn't see me standing there, keys in hand, just about to step out. She was talking to someone, maybe a friend, maybe her ex, and I'll never forget the words that fell out of her mouth. Like poison. He's so easy to charm. Honestly, if I wanted to, I could take him in a week. But that's not the point. She's always had everything stable job. Great guy, all that perfection. It's just fun watching her squirm for once. She laughed. Not a soft laugh. A sharp, satisfied one. And I realized in that moment that Mia wasn't just staying with us to recover from a breakup. She had come for something else entirely. She was watching, testing, undermining, and I had let her in. I stood there frozen. The air felt thick, my pulse pounding in my ears. My entire body burned with betrayal, not just by her, but by myself, for being so blind, for defending her, for believing she just needed help. I didn't say anything that day. I turned the doorknob, walked out, and drove aimlessly for an hour. I stared out the windshield thinking, she's not after Daniel because she loves him. She's after him because I do, and I knew in that moment that this was no longer about helping family. This was war. Night. I started seeing everything with new eyes. The veil had lifted, and suddenly, things I once dismissed as harmless or coincidental now looked like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was building. Daniel, my fiancé, the man who once couldn't go a day without calling me at lunch, who used to grab my hand in public just because had become distant, almost mechanical. His affection was still there, but it was faded, filtered through hesitation, like he was trying to convince himself he still felt the same way. He stopped saying I love you first. His good morning texts, once eager and thoughtful, turned into dry, one-word responses. I told myself people grow comfortable. That maybe this was normal after 7 years. But it wasn't normal. Not when those little things vanished at the same time. Mia became a constant shadow in our lives, and she never missed a beat. Mia had always been charismatic, but now she was magnetic. Whenever Daniel was around, she came alive, laughing a little too loudly, casually leaning in a little too close, wearing makeup at home just because it makes her feel better. I noticed how she started dressing differently too, less like a guest in someone else's house and more like she belonged. Crop tops and silk robes, yoga pants that clung to her like second skin. She looked like it wasn't deliberate, but the worst part wasn't what she wore or how she spoke. It was how she made me feel like a stranger in my own home. Mia had a way of making you question your grip on reality without ever raising her voice. She'd say things like, Daniel looked tired last night. Maybe he's working too hard. Or, you seem tense lately. Is everything okay between you two? Always laced with concern. And Daniel, he started listening to her more than me. When I suggested switching up our wedding venue to something smaller, more intimate, he hesitated. Mia actually said the bigger one had more charm, he replied casually, as if her opinion was some sacred compass now. It was like every decision, every plan we made, somehow had to pass through her filter first. I tried to brush it off. I told myself she was still hurting from her breakup, that maybe being involved gave her a sense of purpose. But, deep down, I knew better. This wasn't grief. This was theater. Mia was writing a role for herself in our relationship, seen, and Daniel was her oblivious co-star. The turning point came one evening while we were watching a movie. I was curled up on the couch next to Daniel, trying to enjoy anything that felt normal. Mia came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her head, her robe tied a little too loosely. She walked right in front of the TV, blocking the screen without so much as an excuse me, and dropped onto the armchair across from us. She crossed her legs slowly, dramatically, like she was posing for a perfume ad. Then she smiled at Daniel, not a sister-in-law kind of smile, not a roommate kind of smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you're daring someone to look at you longer than they should, and he did. He didn't even realize it. But I saw it, the second of hesitation, the flicker of interest. My chest tightened like someone had taken a fist to it. When he finally looked back at me, his eyes shifted quickly, as if hoping I hadn't noticed. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself too. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed, I asked him a simple question. Do you think she should move out soon? His reaction was immediate and defensive. Why would you say that? She just got back on her feet. She's family. I kept my voice calm. It's been almost 2 months, Daniel. She's got friends options. And this isn't working anymore. He sighed, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and gave me that look, half guilt, half annoyance. You've been really cold to her lately. I don't know what's going on, but maybe talk to someone about it. It's like you're jealous of your own sister. That was it. The sentence that cracked something inside me. Jealous of Mia? He said it so effortlessly. So matter-of-factly, like the idea wasn't ridiculous. Like I was the problem. Not her. Not her manipulations or her constant boundary putting. Not the fact that he couldn't see how she was puppeteering our entire dynamic. No, I was the jealous one. I was the unstable one. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing Mia's soft laughter from the guest room down the hall. I imagined her smiling at the ceiling too, maybe scrolling through her phone, content in her slow victory, because that's what it was. Now a war of attrition. She wasn't trying to seduce Daniel with one grand gesture. She was draining my power drop by drop, twisting the emotional screws until I couldn't breathe without second-guessing myself. The next morning, I didn't speak. I went through the motions: coffee dishes, a shower I barely felt, but inside, I had already shifted. I saw now that waiting for Daniel to wake up or for Mia to slip up wasn't going to save me. This wasn't a relationship anymore. It was a performance. A test of how long I could keep pretending not to notice the cracks forming around me, but I wasn't going to break. If Mia wanted to destroy my relationship quietly, then I'd let her think she had succeeded, and when the time was right, I would give her exactly what she'd been asking for. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped loving Daniel the way I used to. Maybe it was when he started quoting Mia's opinions as if they were gospel. Maybe it was when I noticed he didn't look at me the same way anymore. Like I was someone he tolerated, not someone he chose. But what I do remember, vividly and with a clarity that still makes my skin crawl, is the moment I knew Mia wasn't just flirting or playing around. She wanted me gone. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those lazy golden hours when everything in the apartment should have felt warm and peaceful. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I heard them laughing in the living room. A genuine laugh from Daniel. Not the forced kind I'd grown used to lately. My chest tightened. I walked to the doorway silently, just out of sight, and listened. I mean, you don't have to pretend to like her playlist, Mia was saying, her voice full of teasing amusement. Some of that stuff sounds like elevator music for depressed accountants. Daniel chuckled. You're not wrong. I've just learned to tune it out. They both laughed, just two people sharing an inside joke. At my expense, the burn in my throat was instant. I wasn't eavesdropping for drama. I was standing there, frozen, realizing that my fiancé, the man I had built a life with, was perfectly comfortable mocking me with my own sister. That's when I started documenting everything. Quietly, strategically. I didn't explode. I didn't confront. That would have made me the unstable one. Again. No. I smiled through dinners and offered to pour Mia a second glass of wine when she pretended to be too tired to get up. I made pleasant conversation while noting down every time she stood too close to Daniel, every text I'd catch glimpses of over his shoulder, every time he left the room to answer a call that ended with, "I'll call you back later." But the moment that confirmed everything, that turned suspicion into certainty, came one night when Daniel left his phone on the coffee table and stepped into the shower. I didn't plan to go through it. Truly, I told myself for weeks that snooping was beneath me, that if I had to dig through messages to prove something, the relationship was already over. But that night, something told me to look. A gut feeling. And I've learned that gut feelings are rarely wrong. The messages weren't scandalous at first. Nothing that would make an outsider gasp. But that's what made them so much worse. The conversations were emotional, intimate, not overtly romantic, but close enough to make my stomach turn. Mia, I just feel like you're never truly seen when she's around. Like no one notices how much you do, Daniel. Yeah, sometimes I wonder if I'm just the guy in the background of her story. Mia, you deserve to be the main character. Maybe you just picked the wrong co-star. I stopped scrolling. I didn't need to read more. This wasn't harmless. This wasn't a joke. She was grooming him. Slowly, deliberately. Making herself the one person who validated his doubts. Replacing me, line by line, and Daniel, in all. His cluelessness or cowardice was letting her. When he came out of the bathroom, I was sitting at the dining table with his phone in front of me. I didn't say a word, just looked at him. He paused mid-step. What's wrong? I slid the phone across the table slowly. Read it. He didn't move at first, just stared at it like it might explode. Then, hesitantly, he picked it up and scrolled. The blood drained from his face. I watched his lips tighten, his fingers tremble slightly, but instead of apologizing or explaining, the first words out of his mouth were, "You went through my phone." The audacity of that sentence nearly made me laugh. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't shocked at what I'd found. He was angry that I had proof, that I had broken his little illusion and now he'd have to deal with the fallout. You're seriously going to make this about me checking your phone? I asked, voice cold. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down. It's not what it looks like. Of course it is, I replied. It's exactly what it looks like. You're emotionally cheating on me with my sister? But he didn't deny it, not once. That silence said everything. The next day, I called my older Kazuna lawyer and asked what the legal process would look like if I backed out of the engagement. I wanted to be ready. I wasn't going to let them think I was weak or helpless. I wanted an exit plan that didn't look like an escape but like a calculated retreat. But I wasn't done, because by then, it was clear this wasn't about Daniel anymore. It wasn't even about Mia's obsession with control or validation. It was about making them both pay for what they'd done. For weeks I let things play out. I acted a little quieter, a little more distant. I gave Daniel the cold shoulder, but not enough to make him suspicious. I wanted him to believe that I was slowly detaching, not building something. Mia kept up her act, too, bringing him coffee in the mornings, making passive-aggressive remarks disguised as jokes, lingering around him like a shadow, and as they got bolder, I got smarter. I started collecting screenshots, voice recordings, emails, bank transactions, everything, because the next time I called them out, I wouldn't just tell them what they'd done, I'd show them, and I'd do it in front of everyone. The first person I reached out to was someone MIA would have never expected, her ex-best friend. Mia had allegedly accidentally hooked up with Alyssa's boyfriend at a New Year's party and claimed it was a misunderstanding, but Alyssa never forgot. And when I told her what was going on, there was a pause, then laughter, cold, sharp, the kind that only comes from someone who's been burned. To this, Alyssa told me she's a repeat offender. She doesn't want the guy, she wants the power. She likes knowing she can take what other women have. It's like a game to her. Alyssa sent me screenshots, old texts, DMS, even a photo of Mia hugging Alyssa's ex from behind at the same New Year's party Mia swore she hadn't attended. Suddenly, things started to click. I wasn't the first woman she had done this to, but I'd be the last to let her walk away clean. I began digging through my own digital trail messages between Mia and me. Casual photos I had taken over the last few months, screenshots of her flirting with Daniel, right in front of my face under the guise of jokes or sisterly teasing. Every piece painted a clearer picture. This was calculated. This was a long game, and I was the mark. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how far back it went. I found one particular exchange that nearly knocked the air out of me. From a few months before Mia moved in, I had texted her a photo of Daniel and me at a vineyard, smiling, glasses raised, surrounded by golden hills. Her reply had seemed innocent back then. You two look so perfect together. I hope I find that one day. But right beneath that message, in the metadata I never thought to check before, I noticed something strange. The image had been forwarded. Not once, but 3 times. Once to her email. And once to someone labeled only as Muse. I don't know who Muse was. And at that point, I didn't care. I'd seen enough, and I wasn't going to fight back the way Mia expected. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or beg Daniel to open his eyes. I was going to let her walk into her own downfall. The trap began with a favor. I told Daniel I had been invited to an out-of-town work retreat, a land that I'd be gone for a few days. I played it perfectly. Casual, but firm. Even booked a fake hotel reservation just in case he checked. He didn't. He seemed almost relieved, which told me everything I needed to know. The night before I left, I packed a suitcase, made a show of stressing over what to bring, kissed Daniel on the cheek, and thanked Mia for watching the apartment. Then I left, circling back an hour later to the apartment across the street. My cousin, bless her grudge-holding heart, had rented it for the weekend. From that vantage point, I had a clear view into our living room window, and what I saw confirmed everything. The second night I was gone, Mia lit candles. Actual candles on the coffee table. She wore a low-cut dress I'd never seen before. Poured wine into the glasses Daniel and I had gotten as an engagement gift, and curled up beside him on the couch like it was the most natural thing in the world. From my spot in the dark, phone camera rolling through the window, I watched her lean into him, whisper something into his ear, and laugh. Daniel didn't pull away. He didn't look surprised. He looked ready. I recorded everything the next day. I messaged Daniel, told him I had a surprise announcement and wanted to host a small gathering with a few close friends. Nothing big, just dinner, drinks, and a chance to celebrate life. He bought it. Mia did too, of course she did. She probably thought I was giving up, that I'd decided to forgive, forget, maybe even thank her for her twisted intervention. Narcissists always believe they've won long before the game ends. I invited our closest friends, Daniel's family, a few of my coworkers, and Mia's old acquaintances, Alyssa included. The table with our wedding colors, soft creams and golds, an aesthetic she always claimed, made me look washed out. And when everyone was seated, glasses full, laughter flowing, I stood and cleared my throat. I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight. I began, calm and composed, my heart hammering in my chest. It means a lot to me that we could all gather to celebrate endings. There was a pause. Then I clicked the remote. Behind me, the projector lit up the wall with a freeze frame of Mia and Daniel candles glowing, their bodies close, her hand on his chest. Gasps filled the room. Daniel leaped from his seat. What the HLL is this? I didn't answer him. I turned to the next slide. Screenshots of their messages, her words, his responses, nothing edited, nothing exaggerated. Mia stood, her face drained of color. I stared at her. You were fine sneaking behind my back. But now you're uncomfortable being in the spotlight? She stammered. Daniel reached for my arm. Let's just talk privately. This isn't fair. I stepped back. You're right. It's not fair. But neither was inviting my sister into our home and letting her unravel everything we built. I turned to the room. And this, I gestured to Mia, is the sister I thought I could trust. So if any of you were wondering why the wedding's off, now you know. Silence. Alyssa stood and slow clapped. Guess some people never change. That was the final blow. Mia stormed out, Daniel trailing behind her, trying to explain. The rest of the guests sat stunned, unsure whether to leave or applaud. I didn't care. I had done what I came to do, and I wasn't done yet. The fallout wasn't immediate. It never is. At first, there's just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than screaming, where everyone retreats into damage control mode, trying to figure out how to make the consequences go away without actually owning the cause. That's exactly what Daniel tried to do. The morning after the dinner, he showed up at my apartment with flowers. The same flowers he used to buy me when we were still new, and he was still trying. I didn't answer the door, but I watched through the peephole as he stood there, shifting awkwardly, probably rehearsing what to say. Eventually, he slid a handwritten letter under the door, then walked away. I left it there for hours before finally picking it up. It smelled like his cologne. The letter was long, meandering, half apology, half self-pity. He said things like, I never meant for this to happen, and you don't understand how confusing it was, and she made me feel seen. As if my love, my loyalty, and the years I spent believing in him somehow weren't enough. He didn't deny what he'd done. He just tried to justify it with words like loneliness and emotional connection. Not once did he call it betrayal. I didn't respond. Mia, on the other hand, took a different route. A week after the dinner, she posted a photo on Instagram, just her. Let go of toxic people even if they're family. I laughed out loud when I saw it. Truly, out loud. She wanted to control the narrative, to cast herself as the victim in a story where she'd played puppeteer the entire time. But I didn't comment. I didn't message her. I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Instead, I forwarded the post to Alyssa, who immediately reposted it with her own twist. Funny coming from someone who's been other people's toxins since high school. The comments exploded. And Mia, she turned off hers within hours. But the real shift, a moment I knew I had changed, came 2 weeks later. When Daniel's mom called me, I almost didn't answer. Her name popping up on my screen made my stomach twist. I expected her to take his side, to try to guilt me into rethinking everything, but when I picked up, her voice was soft, tired. Sweetheart, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself yet. She continued. I raised him to be better than this. I thought I did. And I can't pretend I understand how you feel, but please know, I never condoned what he did. I'm ashamed. That cracked something open in me, because no one had said it out loud. Yet not Daniel, not Mia, not even most of our friends. Everyone danced around words like ashamed and wrong. But here she was, this woman who'd always adored her son, who had once told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And now she was choosing to speak the truth. Appreciate you saying that, I said, finally. You didn't deserve this, she added. And I hope, someday, someone treats you the way you should have always been treated. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but it did, because slowly the silence began to fracture, not with more betrayal, but with support I never saw coming. Friends I thought would side with Daniel quietly unfollowed him. Some even reached out privately to apologize for not noticing the signs. A few admitted they always found Mia's presence strange but didn't want to say anything. People who mattered started showing up, not with empty sympathy, but with recognition. One of my coworkers, Linda, pulled me aside after a meeting. You handled that whole thing with so much class, she said. If it had been me, I'd be in jail right now. I laughed. Not a fake one. A real one. That's when it hit. Wasn't broken. I wasn't pitied. I wasn't that poor girl whose fiancé cheated with her sister. I was the woman who exposed it, stood tall, and walked away. People weren't whispering behind my back. They were cheering me on, but I knew I couldn't stay in the same city forever. Every corner felt tainted. The cafe where Daniel first told me he loved me. The bookstore where I used to meet Mia for coffee before I knew what she was. Even the park where I jogged felt heavy with memories. I needed a reset, not a vacation. A reinvention? So I applied. For a transfer at work, something I had once put off for Daniel's sake because now wasn't the right time or he wasn't sure he could handle long distance. This time I didn't ask anyone. I just did it, and when the approval came through, I packed up everything I owned into a storage unit, booked a one-way ticket, and left. No goodbye dinner, no final conversations, no explanations, don't know explanations, just me, my luggage, and a future no longer defined by people who saw me as disposable. In the weeks that followed, I started over. New apartment, new job, new routines. I didn't check their social media. I didn't answer Daniel's texts. I didn't acknowledge Mia's veiled quotes or cryptic stories. Because I was no longer part of their story, and they were no longer part of mine. Instead, I built something better. Quiet mornings with coffee and peace. Evenings filled with books, music, and new friendships. A life where my name wasn't attached to scandal but to strength. I stopped introducing myself as someone who almost got married and started simply saying, I'm single. By choice? Because the truth is, what they did wasn't just betrayal, it was liberation. And I let them taste the consequences every single day. In silence, in distance. In the fact that they would never again have access to the version of me they tried to destroy, and that was more satisfying than any revenge I could have plotted. Healing wasn't linear. It never is. There were days when I felt free, weightless even, like I'd finally cracked the shell they'd buried me in for years. But then there were nights where memories clawed their way back. A scent in the hallway that reminded me of Daniel's cologne. A notification from an old shared calendar I'd forgotten to delete. Or worse, a nightmare where I was back at that dinner party. Except this time, no one believed me and I was the one being accused of betrayal. Those nights were harder to escape. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I ever let myself fall so deep into the illusion that Daniel and I were forever. How did I not see that Mia was capable of so much calculated cruelty? The guilt tried to creep in, whispering that maybe I hadn't been enough. Maybe I hadn't loved him the right way. But I'd trained myself to answer those thoughts with truth. I was more than enough. They were just less than I thought. I began journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. At first, the pages were angry, messy, filled with lines scratched out and rewritten. But over time, the entries softened. I wrote about the small victories, how I went a full week without thinking about either of them, how I smiled at a stranger, without feeling like I was faking it, how I started to look at the mirror and see myself again. What surprised me most wasn't just that I was healing, but that I was learning things I never knew I needed to learn. Like how loneliness isn't something to be afraid of. I always feared it, avoided it, filled it with people and noise and distractions. But now, I welcomed it like a guest I hadn't seen in a long time. In solitude, I found clarity. I stopped waiting for texts that never came. I stopped pretending I liked things just to keep the peace. I started doing things just for meal. Learning to cook for one without feeling empty. Reading books I'd forgotten I loved. Even going to a movie alone and laughing louder than I ever had before. But just as I began to stabilize life through one last twist, it started with a package. No return address, no name. Just a small matte black box on my doorstep. Inside, a stack of photographs. Real photographs, not digital. Taken with a camera, printed out, they were of me. Candid, caught in moments I didn't even remember. Walking home with groceries, sipping coffee at a cafe, standing on my balcony in my robe, the kind of photos that make your skin crawl. The kind that say one thing. Someone had been watching me. My stomach dropped. I checked every lock in my apartment, closed every curtain, called the building manager. He said no one had been seen near my door that day, and the security cameras had glitched. Of course they had. For a moment, I thought it was Daniel. Maybe he'd lost control completely. But this wasn't his style. He was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. Then I considered Mia, but she wasn't that patient. If she had something to say, she'd shout it from rooftops. No, this felt different, personal, measured like someone who had studied me, who wanted me to feel powerless. And then it hit me. Muse. That name from Mia's forwarded messages months ago. I never figured out who it was. But what if they weren't just some side character in her life? What if they'd been watching this whole time? Not just through her stories, but through mine. It made sense in a twisted way.